Hello, I'm George Liston, CA, and this is Dialogue, a weekly exploration into the worlds of international affairs, history, and culture. I had the opportunity to speak recently with the Republic of Indonesia's ambassador to the United States. Here is what he had to say. The great importance of Indonesia to the world is suggested first by her statistics. This is the world's fourth most populous country and its largest predominantly Muslim nation. 2/5 of the world's shipping pass through the waters of this vast archipelago, with its thousands of islands, exotic flora and fauna, and rich ethnic and cultural variety. Yet it is the issues with which Indonesia copes that suggests its true significance. The consolidation of democracy, the preservation of ethnic harmony, the elimination of terrorism and crime, and the definition of its place in the new world of global economic ties. My guest is Soemadi Brotodiningrat, Ambassador of Indonesia to the United States. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
It's a delight to have you and to talk about a country so important as Indonesia. And let me go right to what I think might be a very good place to start our conversation. Since the end of the Suharto regime in 1998, Indonesia, I think, has probably been most concerned with consolidating its place as a 21st century democracy. What's your sense of progress on that?
Well, there is a lot of progress already since we launched our reform, which call it Reformasi in 1998. In the political sphere, for instance, we passed through a difficult transitional period from a four-party, rather kind of engineered democracy whereby consensus was always the name of the game in decision-making, to a multi-party democracy. With the last election, we had 48 political parties participating in the election.
That's really quite impressive.
Yes, and now we have 8 parties having their representative in the parliament. Voting now is the order of the day, of course.
That's wonderful. Let me ask you this question also. As a matter of fact, a number of questions about this very encouraging progress in democracy. What's the role of the military these days in terms of it? Because I think for many viewing, it's probably instructive to know that the military has seats in the legislature, does it not?
Yes, yes. And during the government of President Suharto, it is stipulated in the our political system that because the military and the police don't vote, they are compensated in the parliament and given 100 out of 500 seats.
100 out of 500.
20% of the vote. But then over the years, with the progress of political system, their representation in the parliament was reduced. And now with the reforms, they have only 38.
38 seats.
38 out of 500. And in the last meeting of the highest body of the land, which we call People's Consultative Assembly, they have decided that their representation in the parliament will be abolished in 2004.
Interesting. It will be abolished in 2000.
It will be abolished in 2004.
That's very interesting. You know, one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I have a sense of Indonesia. I mentioned earlier that it's the world's largest predominantly Muslim nation, but it's a secular democracy. Is that right?
It is. So we are the largest Muslim populated country in the world, but we are not an Islamic state.
Right. And I would suspect, therefore, that the Islam practiced in Indonesia is primarily of a very moderate nature, very modern sort of religious expression.
Well, let me put it this way. Yes, politically, Islam in Indonesia is very moderate. Socially, Islam in Indonesia is very tolerant. But religiously, most of Indonesian Muslims are devout Muslims.
Devout. That's a very good way of putting it, quite frankly. Again, keeping our focus on democracy and the nature of Indonesian governance, civil society, as we both know, is very important. The non-governmental organizations, the the justice system and so forth.
Yes.
Is it your sense, Mr. Ambassador, that these aspects of democracy also are gaining strength, that you're getting private participation in all the things that make democracy work?
Yes, civil society is a new phenomenon in our democracy. We used to have a system whereby between the civil society and the government, the relationship was rather difficult. The government has always a prejudice to civil society, and civil society will not call themselves civil society unless they are against the government. So it was not a healthy relationship. Now we become to, with our new democracy, we begin to attempt to develop both the democracy and the civil society.
And the relationship between the two.
And the relationship between both.
Right. You know, I must comment, Mr. Ambassador, I really enjoy your candor, your forthrightness. You're a breath of fresh air to talk to.
Well, this is the way we should do. I mean, I have nothing to hide.
You certainly don't. So let me ask you a very pointed question.
Yes.
Part of the strengthening democracy, I think, once again, we would both agree, is eliminating corruption.
Yes.
So let's talk about that subject.
Please do.
What's the progress on that? As a matter of fact, and let me just comment, I've been following stories very closely in the paper, and I think there have been some major indictments coming down in the past few weeks or that kind of thing.
Yes.
What's the story behind that?
Well, corruption is one of our most difficult problem, the most difficult problem that we are facing. It has been there since long time, and with the reform, we are politically determined to fight the corruption as far as we could. It is not as easy as we might wish. So we have still have to work hard, and we have still a long way to go before we completely abolish this code. Because it's not a question of people or bureaucrat or whoever stealing money, but it involves an improvement of the system. Yes, it's very important to put those corruptors of the past into trial and to jail, but it's no less important to see what could we prevent corruption in the future.
Well said.
I think this is, for me, it's even more important.
It's like preventive medicine in a way.
Right. It's always better.
Yeah, to stop it before it starts.
Right.
You know, I want to turn us to some major world issues, because one of the things that one of the impressions I have of Indonesia, because it is so large, and let's once again focus on this. This is an Asian giant. You know, much as China and India are thought of, Indonesia by its size is as well. And my sense these days of all the giant countries in the world is that they're testing grounds in the sense of issues such as terrorism and so forth. I want to introduce in a moment a commentary from Dr. Robert Hathaway to help us understand this. Yes. But first of all, as to terrorism and the U.S.-Indonesian aspect of collaboration, viewed from the Indonesian side, what's good and what's to be improved about it?
Well, let me first say that we are as determined as any other member of the international community to fight terrorism. We participate actively in the war against terrorism within the framework of the UN globally.
Right.
And we have a cooperation with our neighbors in the Southeast Asian countries, the ASEAN group, in this fight against terrorism. And we have a bilateral cooperation with the US, also in this field. And we managed to get a better understanding between the two countries, and we agree that the most effective cooperation, bilateral cooperations between the US and Indonesia in terrorism, is that we have a kind of a tailor-made cooperation.
Right. That fits the precise situation.
That fit the precise situation in each country.
Yeah, because I once again, let me comment on your answer, because I suspect that in fitting the precise situation, we have to look at more than military means. I mean, you must be talking about, once again, preventive medicine in terms of keeping these things from happening, meeting the conditions that give rise to it.
And also one more thing which is very important for me to say here is that one of our pride in our reform is the abolition of a law which we called at that time the anti-subversion law, in which the government can detain people without explaining the reason at that time. And we were so proud during the reform to abolish this.
Mm-hmm.
And now, any cooperations in the war against terrorism, we would like to see that it will not be perceived by our people as sneaking back
into the old ways.
This anti-subversion law in the in our activity.
That's very important. That's actually wonderful news, and it raises the subject of human rights,
yes.
which you and I should talk about also in a moment.
Yes.
But right now, let's look at Robert Hathaway's comments on some of the big issues that affect Indonesia and the world.
Afghanistan, Pakistan, Colombia, Iraq, with all the other areas of turmoil around the world, why now should we be asked to care as well about what happens in Indonesia? It's not simply because Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country, not simply because it's the largest Muslim country in the world, not simply because it's a struggling democracy. President Bush has rightly said that the current war against terrorism is not a war against Islam. But if we are to add substance to Mr. Bush's assertions, if we are to be credible, we must work with, and moreover be seen to be working with, moderate Muslim countries around the globe. We must take pains to avoid what Professor Samuel Huntington has described as a clash of civilizations, one that pits the industrialized West against the underdeveloped Muslim world. Americans have a very real stake in seeing Indonesia succeed, in seeing political pluralism, economic liberalism, and the rule of law take hold. At the end of the day, of course, the Indonesian people themselves will determine their future. But the United States can play a modest role in Indonesia as well, for better or for worse. Americans sometimes get tired of being asked to assume yet another obligation. But with respect to Indonesia, this is an invitation we dare not decline.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, your views about his comments.
Yes. I think I could not agree more with this statement. I would like only say at this point that if he mentioned that perhaps there are a feeling of tired here in America to again being asked to fulfill any obligations. Well, this feeling sometimes also prevail in the countries like ours, you know. So instead of cooperating through pressures, I think it's much better to cooperate in a more open and through a dialogue like we have now.
Let me pick up on that theme, because I think one of the things that I was struck by in Robert Hathaway's commentary, and your own, the sense I have of where you stand, sir, is that there need not be a clash of civilizations.
No, I don't.
There doesn't have to be a West versus East. And maybe Indonesia is one of the places that bridges both or could serve that function.
This is what we always hope, and we still believe that it will not happen. Because like the US, Indonesia is actually a melting pot. It's a place whereby this Huntingtonian phenomenon or the opposite will happen.
Right.
And let us, both the US and Indonesia, prove that it will not lead to this Huntingtonian forecast.
This is why I use the phrase testing ground or laboratory, and you've applied to both the U.S. and Indonesia.
Yes.
Let me then ask you this question on it, because as I said earlier, I appreciate your candor very much. In confronting issues like Aceh or Irian Java, what will be the principle that will preserve the ethnic harmony that is so important, once again, to both these societies?
This is already stated since the beginning of our reform, and since then there were three governments, and the three of them keep reaffirming that we would like to solve this very difficult problem, a problem which right go to the heart of our nationhood's existence. Yet we are determined politically to attempt to solve it through peaceful means, dialogue, and other peaceful means. And hopefully this determination of our government and the majority of our people will be reciprocated by those who want otherwise.
So you intend to, and these, Aceh and Irian Java and other places are, of course, very different in their own relationship, and their own histories and their own situations of, in terms of Jakarta. The problem is different in both places.
But then there are other provinces, other regions, which are also equally different from Jakarta, because Jakarta is only a small part of this vast country. You know, so I think what we would like to achieve, like here, is to have a unity and diversity.
Okay. We talked earlier about the military, and I think you told us that by 2004 it will not have the parliamentary role it has today.
No.
I think we both might agree, Mr. Ambassador, once again, that the 1990s were a very difficult decade in terms of the military's relationship with this country. Human rights was the major issue. It was a decade of estrangement, as I call it, distancing. On the subject of human rights, first of all, has the military reformed itself or looked back into that experience and changed things? And in the larger context, what has the government's stance been for the entire country?
Well, this multidimensional reform that we are conducting now, of course, include the reform of our military. And actually, it is one of the most important reform. And we have just mentioned one rule, which is a political rule.
Right.
But also, equally important is the way they operate.
Exactly.
There were a lot of human rights abuse allegations in the past, and we try to learn from experience and try to improve this in the framework of this large reform. And I think if the U.S. is serious in helping us with this kind of reform of our military, the last thing that should be done is to isolate them. Wow. And the most important thing to do is to expose them, to help expose them how military should be constructed, how the military should behave in a democratic society. And this could only be helped if you invite our military to see for themselves the practice that the U.S. military is having here in the United States.
I think that's very well said. I can't criticize that. On the civil side, there's a Human Rights Commission, is there not?
We have a Human Rights Commission.
And how's that
yes.
faring?
Well, yes, again, our Human Rights Commission is a young one. It's, I think it's around 10 years old only, and yet the progress is already very remarkable. Of course, we still have a long way to go to have a perfect kind of a Human Rights Commission. But I can assure you that that independence from the government is now much more improved compared to the years when they were built.
They function independently.
They function independently. Now they have nothing to do with the government. The election of their membership is now sanctioned by the parliament, not by the government. But then, of course, human rights itself is an evolving concept.
Right.
And being the one who jumped in rather late in this kind of a human rights development, we have a lot to do to catch the train in marching.
But you are going to catch that train.
Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, I feel it necessary to bring the subject of economics into our conversation with some reluctance, because I hardly understand it very well, which you'll quickly grasp. But I do understand this, at least, that the strength of the middle class in every country is very important to domestic economic progress. And of course, the reduction of poverty is the other side of that. So I guess the first question is the strength of Indonesia's middle class. Is it growing? Is it playing a stronger role as a result of its growth in terms of civil society that we talked about earlier? I mean, all these things seem to flow from increasing economic performance. So is the middle class stronger?
Well, let's put it this way. In the past, we perhaps concentrated too much our economic activities through big, large conglomerates, even though the small and medium-sized enterprises, and also, for that matter, the informal sector of the economy, worked together in the system. But the crisis recently gave us a very, very useful lesson. This actually, during the crisis,
The Asian economic crisis.
The Asian economic crisis, it is proven that those small and medium-sized enterprises are those segments of our economy which proved to be a very effective cushion in our attempt to withstand the onslaught of the crisis. So we are now determined to try to get cooperation from everybody in developing this small and medium-sized enterprise.
This is very interesting to me. And we know one of the themes, if I may say so, that goes through your comments is how much Indonesia learns from experience, both its own and that of others. It seems to me that you're making an effort to apply the lessons, some of them very hard won, that is, through tough experience, to improvement.
Yes, we learned not only from others, but also we learn from ourselves. We learn not only the success of others and our successes, but we also try to learn the failures of others and our own failures to improve that.
Well, that's laudable. How about the help that you might appreciate from others? And there are probably a number of issues we could talk about, but one that people may not know so much about. I mentioned at the outset just how vast Indonesia is. It's enormous. I mean, tens of thousands of islands. I heard 18,000 or 30,000?
17,000 something. It depends on whether it's high tide or low tide.
I'm just glad I don't have to count them all. But one of the things that goes with being so vast and an archipelago, as I said earlier also, is 2/5 of the world's shipping.
Yes.
And as a result of that, a major piracy problem.
Yes.
Are you getting enough help from others in combating that?
I'm afraid not yet. This is an area in which, with all the best will that we have, we need help and cooperation from others. Of course, we cooperated very closely with our neighbors because these sea lanes passing through our archipelago pass also through others' territory.
Right.
And this has been done. But then, of course, the dimension that we are facing in this problem, we would appreciate if others also try to help us.
Exactly. Let me take advantage of your broad experience, Mr. Ambassador, and your obvious broad knowledge of the world and issues. If I phrase the question very boldly, we've talked about piracy. What other issue or issues do you think that the world community should be helping Indonesia with? I mean, where are the opportunities that should be embraced in helping Indonesia with major issues?
Well, first, of course, politically, others could help us in preserving our national unity and territorial integrity by making success in our dealing with the phenomenon of separatism peacefully. Peacefully. So the second, of course, is we would like very much to get encouragement and help in continuing our reform process toward a more mature democracy. I use the word more mature because I have been told by our American friends that in spite of those hundreds of years of experience, democracy is something that we have to learn every day.
Absolutely.
And the third, of course, is our economic recovery.
Right.
Our economic recovery is, in this era of globalization, our efforts alone, however hard we are working, we cannot succeed without cooperation from others.
That's an excellent agenda. We have just a moment or two left, but I want to conclude by taking advantage of, once again, your vast experience. I know you've served your country at the United Nations.
Yes.
And the question that I have in mind because of that experience is something like this. One of the phrases I hear for Indonesia and perhaps other places like Brazil and India is emerging mid-level power, which connotes, I think, the importance that these countries have. I wonder, Mr. Ambassador, in light of that influence that's suggested, if their voice is strong enough in the World Councils. For example, the United Nations, and I'm thinking of the Security Council. I'm wondering if, and maybe it's an impossible question or issue, the functioning of these supranational organizations might be improved if Indonesia, for example, were on the Security Council or had roles consonant with its size and importance. What's your sense of all that?
Well, the role of those countries, and for that matter also many other countries in the United Nations, I think it's important, and their weight is potentially there. The problem lies not on the weight of those countries in the United Nations, but the weight of the United Nations itself in governing or at least managing international relations. This is the real question. What we would like to see is how together countries around the world, members of the United Nations, again discuss more seriously how to improve the role of the United Nations. But then again, this is a very important world body, but equally important is regional cooperations, because regional cooperations is also there, not as the opposite of the world body,
right, but a complement
but as a building block
for it
toward a globalization.
Once again, very wise words. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Lester, thank you very much as we here. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
And that's our program. I'm George Liston, CA, and you've been watching Dialogue, a co-production of MHC Networks and the Woodrow Wilson Center. We come to you every week from the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in the heart of Washington, D.C. Please join us again next week.